Hello, everyone. This is Tripp, and today I have a little something special to share with you. As you know, we have a community here that supports and makes the podcast possible. And one of the perks, one of the things that goes down is a regular little members only podcast called Ruining Dinner with Diana Butler Bass. In it, Diana and I, a church historian, a theologian, ruin dinner. We talk about those topics you just don't talk about at the dinner table: religion and politics. It's always a timely conversation. What's going on in the news, culture, the big questions shaping religion in America, and these kind of things. And, well, we wanted to give you an invitation to join the Homebrewed community or Diana's Substack, the Cottage, or both. That's even more fun. Anyway, these communities make so much of our work possible. We do these regular little gatherings online, and we invite everyone that are members to join the stream, and they usually go, 70, 80 minutes or so. And I thought it would be fun to let you know what they're like. So this is like a teaser, a taster, a sampler of what happened at the ruining dinner we just did. If you dig it, then come on over. Click one of the links on the episode description, join our communities, and you'll be invited to join them live. And then you'll get the video and audio after each time, and you'll be able to ruin some dinner or, hang out with us, especially during this election season, which is sure to have plenty to talk about. Also, if you think it would be fun to hang out with us in person, then come on out to Theology Beer Camp, October 17th and 19th in Denver, Colorado. And it's not just Diana and I. We're going to have over 30 different God pods, kind of progressive Christian podcasts of all different sorts, and a whole host of different scholars. And hang out with them, have delicious craft beverages, lots of fun. And, if you're digging this, just imagine what happens when Diana Butler Bass and me and people like Ilya Dilio or Grace G. Sun Kim, Jorg Rieger, Gary Dorian, Brian McLaren. It's going to be amazing. And we'd love for you to hang out with us. And if you want to come, use the code Hobbit Cottage, all caps, no space, and you'll get $50 off your ticket. I'm just saying, it'll be a blast. All righty? Enjoy this little taster of some of the favorite bits of convo from our most recent Ruining Dinner gathering.
Well, it's a big old dog whistle, of course, to Christian nationalists. And, if you've paid much attention to the growing voice and presence of Christian nationalists on social media, and they're becoming the really hardcore ones are becoming very overt about their views of women. The goal, and they say this in their own words to attract their own people. The goal is the full restoration of patriarchy in the law in every way, shape, or form, like it ever went away in the first place. But nevertheless, things that they want to do. And there was an extended interview with a pastor who has a congregation outside of Austin that is a well-known sort of center of Christian nationalism. His name is Joel Webbon. And in the course of this interview, and right now you can look at it pretty much anywhere on X. I imagine it's showing up on TikTok and some of the other social media platforms too, where he says that, the whole problem with America is that patriarchy has been diminished. And that one of the biggest culprits in doing that was that women had the right to vote. And he says in this interview, clear as day, it is the Christian position that only households count, and that women only count insofar as they are part of a household that has a man at the head of it. And so he believes that the 19th Amendment then is anti-biblical and anti-Christian, and that we should go back to every household having a single vote. And that means the male head of household. So the father, and you might say, well, what if, you got a single mother? There is no such thing as a single mother. A single mother, in Webbon's view and in the view of Christian nationalists, is always under the protection of a man. So it would be her father would vote for her. And if her father was dead, it would be her brother. And if she didn't have a brother, it would be her uncle or her male cousin. Or if her son was old enough, her son would be the head of household over her. And so old enough would be in some circumstances 18, but in other circumstances, a male head of household would be as young as 13 or 15 years old. And that his decision making and his economic sort of, interests would be put ahead of that of any woman who was under his protection. And so that's the vision. Webbon said it completely clearly. There was not a doubt in any listener's mind if you listen to that interview, for exactly the kind of society that they are working towards. And, for years I was saying to people, that they want to repeal the 19th Amendment. And every time I said that, people would say, "Oh, you're such an alarmist, Diana. Don't be mean. They don't want that. They just have their own opinion." And I'm going, "No, I'm not being mean. I'm telling you the truth. These are their views, and they're dangerous, and they are going to hurt people. They're going to hurt you. They're going to hurt your daughters. They're going to hurt your cousins. They're going to hurt everybody. And they're going to be destructive to democracy." And Webbon actually goes on. He said, "Oh, yeah, I no longer believe in democracy." And so here's this guy, pastor of super big church outside of
Hmm.
Austin, Texas, with a great big platform, and one of the major voices of Christian nationalism saying, "Well, nah, democracy, don't believe in it anymore. I've come to despise it." That was his exact words. "I've come to despise democracy." And then basically the reason he despises it is because women have too much power in this society, and that it's incumbent upon all Christians to return society to its biblical base of absolute patriarchy in every case, and that women are good only. And see, this is what Vance is appealing to. Women are good for one thing and one thing only, and that is exactly what you said, and that is having babies. Somebody just asked what his name is. His name is Joel, Joel Webbon, Webbon. He's the pastor of a uh, church in Texas.
Hello, everyone. This is Tripp, and today I have a little something special to share with you. As you know, we have a community here that supports and makes the podcast possible. And one of the perks, one of the things that goes down is a regular little members only podcast called Ruining Dinner with Diana Butler Bass. In it, Diana and I, a church historian, a theologian, ruin dinner. We talk about those topics you just don't talk about at the dinner table: religion and politics. It's always a timely conversation. What's going on in the news, culture, the big questions shaping religion in America, and these kind of things. And, well, we wanted to give you an invitation to join the Homebrewed community or Diana's Substack, The Cottage, or both. That's even more fun. Anyway, these communities make so much of our work possible. We do these regular little gatherings online, and we invite everyone that are members to join the stream, and they usually go 70, 80 minutes or so. And I thought it would be fun to let you know what they're like. So this is like a teaser, a taster, a sampler of what happened at the ruining dinner we just did. If you dig it, then come on over. Click one of the links on the episode description, join our communities, and you'll be invited to join them live. And then you'll get the video and audio after each time, and you'll be able to ruin some dinner or, hang out with us, especially during this election season, which is sure to have plenty to talk about. One of the things that's, I think, difficult, or something I'm thinking about, is this is being crystallized in his, like, "I've come to despise democracy" element. And I think it's revelatory of a larger problem where our culture as a whole has become so antagonistic. Um, and I think there's a lot of reasons that it's got there. But the but in a context where the energy of the relations among citizens here is inherently antagonistic, that it's kind of like an image I've been thinking about is like an above ground pool where you start running in circles and then there's like a whirlpool energy. So if you get in, you kind of
Mhm.
have to join it. The only thing you can do that doesn't create conflict is speeding up in the same direction. If you try to slow down, there's pushback. If you turn the other way, you're going to get trampled and pulled under. And I think that over the last 30 years, the kind of energy of the public square has just gotten increasingly faster, and we're unaware of it because the only way you don't end up with conflict is going faster. And that makes any kind of resistance create conflict in increasingly intense ways. And when you're in that space, um, and the impact of this kind of increasing acceleration in the whirlpool is there. We want to go like, oh, here's what the problem is. The thing is, we so often will point to a thing or a policy or a person or a group, and don't realize how, yeah, these things are either they can be good or bad, but a lot of the problems being generated from just an inability to relate because we're all trapped in a giant whirlpool. And then someone says out loud, how politics has changed. Like democracy's a problem, right? Like democracy's the problem. And when we get to that space, it's just that to me is scary because a prior to democracy, we handled disagreements in way worse ways. There's not like these beautiful pictures of before democratic nation states of people handling how do you relate in multi-ethnic, multi-religious systems of power with inherent competition at the base of it. How do we do that in life-giving ways where we love our neighbor, maybe even as ourselves? Like that's hard to do and it's hard to imagine. And yet, when you get to a place where now, like the democratic project is a means to your own end, not an end in and of itself. That part of what modernity did, and I think this is at the heart of Protestantism in America, is the recognition that there's an inherent good that we learned how to relate to our neighbors across difference, where we don't result into a kind of inherently aggressive, antagonistic way. But the moment the political levers become means to coerce our minority opinion on the majority, uh, then um, then our tribe winning or whatever way we manipulate, pervert, distort things to win happens, and 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 so it's hard to like to go, yes, that's ugly, and then how do we engage in this system that isn't also increasing the antagonistic energy? How do we step out of it? Um, and
Mhm.
and like one small place I'm excited about is just the shift of framing, of not framing this entire election as the other side hates everything and wants to kill democracy versus autocracy. When you see that kind of rhetoric coming out of a preacher, um, yeah, you're like, it's off-putting. And when it gets echoed in any kind of campaign by side, it's gross. I think people just need to know it's really cool that human beings figured out a way to relate without killing each other all the time or without enslaving people or exploiting them incessantly. Not that we don't do some of those things and we have to do better, but if we can't figure out how to mediate differences and relate to neighbors across difference, assuming in some way there's the integrity of our relationship with our neighbors is more important than getting our way all the time, then we aren't handing off a democracy uh, to the next generation. And that's the thing I'm most excited about. Uh, is those little ways both candidates have signaled, um, like we can be clear about who we are and what we're for, but what we're for and who we are does not mean half the American population is left out of our imagination and our future.
Yeah, and I was really struck when you just said that, in effect, democracy part of the reason why I love it too is it's one of the better systems that human beings have invented to solve problems and try to live together with people who are not all alike. without killing or converting everybody. I mean, usually through history, what's happened is when you run into difference, you have to kill the other tribe or you have to convert them. You have to assimilate them in some way. And the ideal of democracy, in the increasing ideal of democracy through the 20th century and now in the early 21st century, is the expansion of the potential rights of democracy to all people, and to keep widening that sphere, and to figure out who counts as legitimate participants in the democratic experiment. And we've gotten to a place in the last 30 years where we're saying, hey, maybe everybody counts. Everybody counts. And more than just every human being counts, but creation itself in some way counts. And so this has been part of our politics, is what does it mean to have this expanded vision of who counts, and how then we can forge real community or discover something that is called the common good or the good life, um, and to do that without hurting one another. And it is a much bigger historical project, I think, than what we usually consider. I think, Trip, this is one of the places where you and I get along so well, is that the vision of Christianity at its core, to me, is a table with endless amount of chairs, is that everyone is invited to the feast. The only thing that excludes you from the feast of God is when you yourself exclude your or you exclude yourself from that feast, when you try to take over the table, when you try to kill other people at the table, when you don't come prepared with the joy and the vision of oneness and connectedness that's going to greet you at that table, and instead you feel like you have to all of a sudden control it. Those are the things that you're excluding yourself from that feast, but no one is excluded from the banquet of God. And the table never stops expanding. There's always enough. There are always plenty of chairs. More people are welcome. And to me, that's where the Christian vision and the democratic vision come together. And I'm always trying to work right in that territory. And it's not easy to
Mhm.
do theologically. But that is the call, sort of, that I feel theologically in the middle of this massive global long-term historical experiment in democracy.
You use the language of like more people getting a voice in the process. And I think one of the difficulties is like as the expansion of voice happens, um, if your identity, if you experience your own identity as the only one with a microphone, then it feels like it comes at a cost, and that kind of cost gets even more intense when you no longer even feel listened to. So, like when I think of more cultural conservative or traditional culture people, part of that energy I think comes from not feeling listened to. Like we have, my grandma would say, "Well, you got one mouth and two ears, use accordingly," and
I
like
like your grandma.
as our culture diversifies and it becomes less traditional, you don't have the same shared norms. You end up with a culture that doesn't have a single logic or a dominant form of expression, even though there are people that wish it still did, right? So, um, but that means there's much less that can be assumed as shared, and that ends up increasing the demand of listening needed to get to a democratic consensus. And I think that antagonistic energy that exists in our culture leads those of us that are more progressive, where the expansion of voices, the decentering of a single dominant expression or narrative, if that is exciting to you, if it's something like you get it pumped when it happens, then it's more incumbent on us to actually learn how to listen to those where it's experienced as something that generates anxiety or feeling cultural resentment, because if we have a future together, we all have to be neighbors. And I mean, this is true if you're in a family and someone feels shut out and not listened to, even if you think their suggestion's stupid. It's amazing how many parents discover if you just let the teenager vent at you and you hear it and they know you've heard them, then you can figure out how to get along. It's true when you're dealing with conflicts in churches. So often, and we've seen this in a lot of denominations recently, you'll split and what happens or neither side ends up feeling heard. And so knowing the increasing cultural diversity and stuff as more and more people get voices, one of the things to address the kind of energy of antagonism is learning how to listen. Um, and that doesn't change what you're contributing to it or advocacy for voice, but being heard and being is a way you signal recognition. And I think culturally, at least this has been my experience talking more and more to people being back here that are more traditionally culture wise, feel ignored. They feel like the coastal elites that shape culture, industry, entertainment, and stuff. They're the ones that get to be butt of jokes and no one else does. And it's like they're describing a future where like my way of life doesn't have integrity in it. And their response is, then our way of life is going to be the only one. Right. And so when I think of what does being a disciple, what does loving my neighbor look like, as I see that relational antagonism, like I think I know what to do with my voice when it goes to advocating inclusion, expansion, these kinds of things. It takes, I need the Holy Ghost to help me learn how to listen.
I got really stuck on this passage last week, um, when it came up in the lectionary, uh, because I think it is probably one of the most political pieces of scripture I've read in a really long time, which is it saying something because I think most of scripture is political. But this was in the lectionary this past Sunday. Therefore, shedding the lie, let each one of you speak the truth to his neighbor, because we are one another's corporal members. Be indignant, yet do not sin. I mean, this is exactly what you're talking about, really. And do not let the sun set on what provokes your anger. Never give slanderers a place. Let the thief no longer steal. Out of your mouth, let no foul utterance proceed, but instead, whatever is good and needed for edification, that it might impart grace to those who are listening. There's some burden on the listeners as well. Do not grieve the Spirit, for you're sealed for a day when the fee for liberation is paid. I love this translation. This is the David Bentley Hart translation. And then this, let all bitterness and animosity and indignation and clamoring and defamation be removed from you together with every evil, and become helpfully kind to one another, inwardly compassionate, forgiving among yourselves as just as God graciously forgave you. And the what I find really interesting about that passage is it starts with truth. Let each one of you speak truth to his neighbor, and it ends with kindness. And so the what does it mean in this kind of political environment to hold these two things together? And I've been asking that question in several different settings I was in this week, and it's been fascinating. There are people who said the truth is never kind, you know. So it's like, actually, I think not. I think that when you speak truth to your neighbor, you are acting with kindness. You're, you're not letting people marinate in things that are dangerous or destructive or, you know, untrue. I mean,
Mhm.
that can take you in the wrong direction. And so it is always kind to speak truth. And then on the other hand, it's like we think of kindness as kind of this, uh, you know, nice. We think of it as very mushy, never criticizing, never analyzing, never kind of holding up the thing for as it is. Instead, just kind of putting a soft haze on everything. And so the other load of criticism I've gotten, if one person, I was so annoyed, said, I used to love the cottage, but now all you do is blame, shame, and criticize everybody. And I'm going, what? And it was in response to being analytical and pointing out, like I did at the beginning of this conversation, this stuff about Joel Webbon, to point out what Christian nationalists believe is not unkind. I pointed out exactly what he said, that he despises democracy. The reason he despises it is because it has empowered women, and the way to fix it is to go back to patriarchy. It is incredibly kind. I'm saying exactly what he said. And then I went on one step further. Notice I did not call him an idiot. I did not personally attack him. I did not say that everybody who joined his church was a fool and that was going to, be damned into hell or what have you. I that was not part of that. I said this worldview is operative and it is dangerous. It is dangerous to women. It is dangerous to those who love women. It is dangerous to the the fullness of this kind of society that you and I are dreaming of, that we think is fully biblical and that we want to become more generative in our political life. And so what I think that in some ways we've lost is that capacity of understanding the relationship between truth and kindness. Is that we've misidentified kindness as simply being nice, kind of live, laugh, love, stuff. And we have misunderstood truth as being nasty, uh, rather than it being just truth. And there are different kinds of truths. There are actual factual truths, and then there are truths that we each hold. And I actually think this scripture speaks to both of those things. I think it speaks to the things that are simply true about the nature of the universe, that there are facts, and those things remain somewhat unchanging. But then it says, "Let each one of you speak the truth to his neighbor." Well, is that about the nature of the universe, or is that the truth that I know from my experience? I think it means both. And so truth is both clear, and yet it is also experiential and situated within our lives. And to be able to speak truth on both of those levels, the critical, analytical, clear, this is just the way that it is level, and also this is true, is a really important way for us to be able to live. So anyway, I'm really struggling with this, and I want this passage to sort of be the passage that shapes my vision as I move through this election season. And but it doesn't mean that I'm always going to be super nice, because I'm going to be critical, because criticism and analysis is part of truthfulness. And truthfulness doesn't mean that I have to get out there and say that because these Christian nationalists believe these things, they're all horrible people. And, I don't have to insult them, but I can be clear about the worldview, and I can make judgments on the worldview.
Hmm.
And so I think that, for people who are really, I mean, you're talking about how you're struggling there. I'm certainly struggling there. And I think it's really important for people who like us and who listen to us and who read what you and I put in the world. This is what we're trying to do. And if you just come to us and expect us to be all nice all the time, you've come to the wrong place, because niceness is not kindness. But you will meet up with two people who are trying to be kind. Also, humor can be kind. Satire can be kind. All sorts of things can be kind, that are edgy. You don't have to have no edge if you're
Yeah.
kind.
Well, it
Uh,
was in
and
Ephesians. What was it?
we're gonna be truthful. This is the end of Ephesians 4 in the beginning, the first couple verses of
Okay.
Ephesians 5. And it moves right. The lectionary verse actually ended with, "Become imitators of God, therefore, like beloved children, and walk in love."
The way at the beginning when you were talking about those are like, no, truth is never kind. Like with this kind of, I will tell you truth. And underneath that, right, the proclamation of truth also includes a judgment of your value, right? Like if you're not on this side, then you're against it. Um, that was one of the things, Dietrich Bonhoeffer struggled with throughout throughout the whole rise of Nazi Germany,
Was it
and
really?
where and he has this passage right that he wrote not long before he was arrested, to his brother-in-law, who's one of the guys behind the conspiracy that's like a double agent, and he's reflecting on the a text where it says like, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And he goes like, no matter how hard it is, we are working against God if we cultivate contempt for those we oppose,
Wow.
because that's not what God did.
Right.
Which doesn't mean not having clear convictions and working for the end of the Nazi regime, and all that kind of stuff is there. But it's like this letter he wrote to three close friends that have been through the whole thing 10 years after the Nazis came to power, and he's giving himself a reminder, like, we can't cultivate contempt for humans because God gave them dignity, created in the divine image, and out of God, who is love, expresses that freedom precisely by redeeming us all. And so there's not someone who has the power within them to erase the inherent value God's given them. And to me, that's like the thinking about that, the desire of the divine expressed in the incarnation, um, is like, that's what truth and kindness looks like. And if you think all the way back to the beginning of John, where it's like the word became flesh, came to its own, and they knew him not. Right. So
Mm.
like from the very beginning, there's clarity that the Logos, the source of all love, life, and existence, takes flesh, and they didn't recognize it, but that didn't change the trajectory of the Word embodied, um, coming and embracing all. So the that kind of that passage in Ephesians, the way like Bonhoeffer is reflecting on a God who gives God's self for us all. To me, that's like the place I try to think about grounding my feet when it goes like, well, how do I listen? How do I kind of plant a feet where the culture's got this giant whirlpool where the easy thing to do is to get faster and go like, truth, and scream it at the person next to you. You're like, no, we are a people of truth, and we have our own attempts at grasping at it. But the truth of the situation isn't the antagonism. The truth of the situation is Judas was served the Eucharist, and
Right.
um, in the end, sin, law, and death are conquered. So God may be all in all, not all in some. And if that's what God's up to, and God had that desire for you when you cultivated contempt for the way of love, then then kindness is not above you, because it's not above God.